All right, so for this one, we're going to talk about some concepts of conditionals. Now, there's a couple different ways that we can write conditionals, but really conditionals are a way for us to branch our code. We can do one or the other. We can do this only when a certain case happens. It's really how we build all of our programs. It's how we can create games. It's how we can have our player move left when the keyboard A key is pressed. We can have them move right when the D key is pressed. So we want to build some of that into our code. And in order to do that easily, is we also need to start thinking of the things that we create in code to be like a thing, an object, a simple object. Okay, simple objects that we have in our world around us. They have a weight, they have a size, they have a height, they have a width, they have a position. They might have a type of bounciness. They might have a specific color. So our video game characters that we create, might end up having a number of lives, or they might have an attack strength or a movement speed. All of those are things that we want to start putting into an object. Okay. Now, variables, regardless if it's global or local, can hold more than just values, more than just numbers. They can also hold words. Okay. They can also hold simple objects like we've been talking about. So we're going to go ahead and create one, and then we're going to build in some conditionals. Okay, so let's start off with a player. Okay, we're going to create a player. Now we're going to give them an initial value. So we're going to say player is comprised of this entire code block. Everything in here is part of the player. Okay, players can have certain attributes. Okay, the syntax for a simple object is a little bit different than what we've been doing up to now. Up to now, all of our statements have been ending with a semicolon. Inside of a simple object, we finish every attribute with a comma. Okay, except for the last one. So we could say our player has an X position. Notice I'm using the colon. Okay, I could say that our player has an X position and it is at width divided by 2. Okay, that's the end of my attribute. I want to add another one. I add a comma. I could say that my position for my player in the Y direction is height divided by 2. Maybe I have a size. Let's say it's 50. Maybe I have a color, and I can assign it a color. Let's even do some random values. So we could say random 255 for random color, random 255 for the green channel, and random 255 for the blue channel. All of these are things that we can do when we're defining our stuff. And I'm done with that attribute. Now I want to add something else. All of these are components of our player. Now our player, we want to start kind of organizing our stuff. Our players is, we could draw them, but it would be better if the player knew how to draw itself. If the player was checking if it was alive or dead. If the player was checking if a key was pressed to know if it needs to move. So we can create functions that are a part of the player and don't belong to anything else. Okay, so usually when we create a character or a player or a simple object in a game, we usually have a couple different functions. We usually have a display function, okay? And we can write it like what we've done other functions. The only thing is we don't have to actually write function in front of it, okay? Now the main key thing is that when I minimize this, this is just like any other attribute. If I'm going to add another one, I have to put a comma, okay? So inside of my display for my player, I could say, you know what? I want my player to display at whatever color I picked right here, and at the position of this X and this Y and with this size, okay? But now we're not talking about just any variable. We're talking about just that one, okay? Which means that we start using a new keyword, and it's called this. The word this is helping us refer to this specific thing. It's scoped inside of whatever code block I'm in. So if I'm inside of the player, then, because that is my largest object, if I'm inside of the player, then when I'm using the this keyword, I'm referring to the player. So if I say I want the player's X position, then I would say this X position, this Y position, this size, this color, okay? And in order to access this specific attribute, I got to use a dot operator. That means that when I'm talking about the player itself, everything that's nested inside of it, every attribute, I can access by using a period. So I could say that I am filling whatever shape I'm going to be doing with this color. So I write this dot color. Now I know that this feels like a lot. An object is something that you got to kind of get used to. We kind of think about it normally in life, but it is something that once we start coding, we got to be a little bit more explicit. This is a little bit more of an uphill battle trying to learn how to do objects. But once you have this, it makes it really, really easy to create games. So this is something that we definitely need to have to be successful. Okay, so we want to fill with the color that we defined as an attribute. And let's say we're just going to do a circle shape, but we want to create the circle shape using this color as our fill, and we want to draw it at the player's X position, the player's Y position, and we want it to be the player's size. Okay, there's a lot of benefits to doing this. If I add images and stuff, and I move the player, I have the player move from one corner to the next. Because I'm using the this, it will update to whatever this player's position is. So then everything will stay locked together. This is a really good way of kind of encapsulating in a box everything that has to deal with the player. So this is what I want when I want to display. Okay, now I can minimize. So functions, we're writing our statements the same. Whenever we're referring to attributes of an object, though, we have to finish with a comma. So this would be enough for us to display. Now, if I run, I did create the player. The player exists, okay? The player is not actually created, though, until I get to the end of the code block, okay? So all of this stuff becomes a part of the player. You can't be created missing your arms and your legs and then have them created later on. You were created all at once. So that's the same thing for us. This player is created all at once. This is the player, okay? Which means that's the end of my statement. It means I finish with a semicolon, okay? Now, I could console.log at this point and log what the player is and see it in my console. Now let's look at what that is, okay? This is showing everything about my player. It's showing that my player has an X, it has a Y, it has a size, it has a color, it has a display, okay? And it's showing that this display is a function. It's going to do something, all right? So that gives me a lot of information. Now I could also say, well, what is that player's X position? Using the dot operator, it will pull whatever values are nested inside of there for the player, okay? But I did that display, I don't see it. Okay, well, because the display is also a function, if you don't call it, nothing is going to happen. So if I want to call it inside my draw, then I would say player.display. And now there is my player. Okay, now our player, he doesn't move, he doesn't do anything. Ultimately, I want to get him to move. So I want to add some more functionality, okay? I could get my player to wiggle back and forth. Maybe I might want to write some update, okay? Now an update could be something that I could pass some values in. I could update health. I could update lives. I could update position doing it this way. And I could say, this dot x is equal to, well, not equal, I'm assigning it the mouse x. And I could say this dot y is the mouse y. Now, again, I'm not calling that update, even though I made it. If I want to call it, I need to call it somewhere. So here, I could call it inside of my draw. Traditionally, if you're doing games, you usually do this prior to displaying to make sure that it is exact. And now we got it locked to our mouse, but we want to do something different. We could pass in values. We could also check things. So here, could be where we are checking code. Normally our display is just reserved for our display. Our update will be responsible for choosing what we are doing with our code. So we could use things like the key pressed to be able to do stuff. So let's look at key pressed. Now we learned key pressed for the canvas. Let's see about checking keys for a player. Okay, we have key code, we have key is pressed. So this will fire when any key is pressed because that's what they have. Key is pressed is just going to hold true or false. And that key code that we've played with before, we could also use that to check things. So if a specific key code is being pressed, then I could choose to move. So let's make our character move, and we're going to use the WASD keys. Okay, so we're going to write some conditionals. Now, I'm going to break this up for left and right movement, and then up and down movement. Okay, and we are going to end up having a number of things. If I'm pressing left, or I'm pressing the A key, I want to move left. If I'm pressing the D key, I want to move right. If I'm not pressing either one of those keys, I don't want to move horizontally at all. Okay? And there's a number of ways that we can set this up, but we can have it basically where we have, the way that we're going to set it up right now is there's going to be a default direction. If I press A and D at the same time, it's going to move whatever conditional is true first. Okay, so if I look at the MDN website and I type in conditionals, I can end up looking at this, making decisions in my code. Okay, basically, we do this all the time. If it's raining, then we're going to bring an umbrella. If it's cold outside, we are going to wear a coat. I have to go, wake up with an alarm in the morning early if it is a school day. Or I can sleep in if it is the weekend or it is the summer. Okay? So we have conditionals. We've been using them multiple different ways. Now, there's a couple different things to note. We can have code where we are writing, if this condition is true, then we're going to execute this code block. So that would be from this one to this one. Otherwise, that's what an else is. Otherwise, we're going to run this. So that means that we're only running this code if it's true. If this condition is false, we're going to run this code. Okay? Another way that we can write it is that we could not use the else, and we say, if this is true, run this code. Only run that code when it's true, like what we did when we press the enter. We draw the background. Okay? If we don't put an else, though, then what is not inside of an else condition piece then would run regardless. So, if we're hitting an enemy, we lose some health, but we are still playing. If we are dead, then maybe I don't need to display my player anymore. Okay, so there are times that I might need to just use just an if conditional. Other times I need to use an if and an else because I have two different options. There are other times that I might have actually more than two options. Maybe I have three options. In this case, maybe I want to have, if I'm pressing the A key, I'm moving to the left. If I'm pressing the right key, then I am moving to the right, which that means I can use an else if like this. Otherwise, if I'm not pressing either one of those, then I just do not move. Okay, so we want to set up our code like this to have our player's X position change based off if we are moving to the left or right. Now, since we are doing some movement and we want to kind of keep that a little bit locked in, we can put, say, some movement speed. Now, in a lot of games, let's just say that we're doing 5. In a lot of games, you have to be careful, especially if you can move diagonals, because it'll make you move faster in the diagonal. And you could double check stuff. You could change the speed if you wanted to make it so that that speed is the same. If we were using vectors, we could normalize it and then just magnify it so we're moving the exact same speed in any direction. Okay. Other games you might have where you're just moving up, down, left, or right. Okay. So I would like it where we're not moving, we're only moving in 4 cardinal directions. Okay. So if the key code, and let's open up what right and left and all of those fun ones are. So let's go back to references. We know that we're going to go to events. And we want to look at key code. We want to get back to that website. Okay, so we're doing A key, that's 65. D key is 68. Okay, so if key code is equal to, equal to 65, then, so this is my code block, then let's just log some console code right now. Move left. Okay. Otherwise, so I don't want these to happen both at the same time. So else if key code is equal to 68, console.log move right. Now let's run. Okay, we have update. As long as we're running our display and our update, we should be okay. All right, I'm pressing A, I moved left. I press D, I move right. Okay, now see how it's still going up? That's because it's always taking the last key press. Okay, so if the key code, if I press D, it's going to continually show that as my key code until I press something else. So I just press the W and then it stopped. I press it again and it keeps going up. Now let's see what happens when I press A and D at the same time. A is firing. Okay, so in here, right now I have where it's defaulting to this one first, because if this one is true, it's not going to bother checking this one. If I'm not pressing any of those keys, then I don't really want to move anywhere. Okay, so I could write an else if I need to very specifically do it. In this case, though, I'm not moving anywhere here. So my movement speed needs to not increase anymore. So here I want to move to the left. So that means this dot x minus equals the this dot movement speed. Okay, if I want to move to the right, this dot x plus equals this dot movement speed. All right, now I press my A, press my D, I'm moving. Again, though, that is doing the last key code. So that's where, when I'm looking, I want to actually use another piece in the reference, which is called key is pressed. So that means that I need to check when I'm pressing down a key and it's still being pressed down, okay? So when I have a conditional that has multiple things that I need to consider, this is called a complex conditional. And there are three things that I can use to hook them together. I can check that this is being pressed, and at the same time something else is being pressed that's using an AND operator, and it's written like this: 1, 2, and signs. That's the shift and the 7 key on your keyboard. So I could say that and, no, I want to open this in a different page, and then I want to go back so I can look back at that reference. Okay, so when we have key is pressed, this is what is currently being pressed as we speak. Okay, so that is going to return true or false. So I want to check it. Key is pressed. Let's see what happens now. Okay, now when I press the A key, I stop. I'm only moving while it's being pressed. Okay, now let's go ahead and add that to our other one. And now we are moving. Oops, I gotta make sure that I have my conditional needs to be in these parentheses. And when we're writing conditionals, they only can be true or false. They can't be anything else. You can't put words in there unless it's checking to make sure that there is some type of match. So now when I'm pressing left and then I lift up, I stop. If I'm pressing both of them, I'm still going to default to left. So for right now, that's okay. We're moving left, we're moving right, that's okay. All right, so that is checking if we are moving left or right. I want you guys to do for up or down. That is your guys' challenge. So we're using key pressed. You guys can use the keycode.info, and you guys are going to check the key codes. If we are currently pressing the W key or the S key, we want to move up or down. Make sure that you guys are moving in the correct direction. If I press W, I am moving up on my canvas. If I'm pressing the S key, I'm moving down on my canvas. Okay, the other thing that you guys need to consider when you're trying to do this for movement is that our left and right movements are independent of our up and down. Okay, which means that I should not have another else if continuing on up and down. I should have a new if else if set of conditionals for moving up and down, because my up and down movement, it doesn't matter if I'm moving left or right, I should still be able to do this. If you are wanting to do only those 4 movements, you could do that, but that's not what we're doing in this challenge right now. The other piece of the challenge is you guys are going to use images. You're going to find an image, preferably without a lot of background, okay, and find a character. Doesn't matter what you're wanting to move, as long as it's appropriate for school, and you're going to preload it. You're going to set it up as an image for the attribute for your object, okay? Then what you guys are going to do is you're going to draw it after the circle so you can see it on top of the circle color, okay? Using the size and the X and the Y. You will also probably want to use push and pop because you're going to have to change the image mode. So I want you to change the image mode for the circle to be center so that you can draw the image based off of the X and Y position of your player. Okay. The last piece that you're going to do is that in your draw, instead of us drawing a color for our background, you are going to find a background image, and you're going to replace the color with a background image. So I would have go to the references, look up background, read that piece of code for how to put an image in there to replace your background. All right? Good luck. Have fun.